So, this is my second video. I did finally get a question posted from my first video, which said, "A nice video, random YouTuber!" Exclamation point. I have a question. Why do you deny the resurrection of Jesus? Question mark. Isn't it kind of possible if it was an act of God? Random YouTuber, yeah. And Noel's actually my friend, and I told him to ask me a question so I could create a second video. But there's an issue. I'm not denying that God exists. Matter of fact, I believe he exists, but I don't think that you could ever have sufficient evidence of that. And what it means to actually believe in God is an interesting question in its own right. But I think God exists. I think God's probably all-powerful and all-loving, and I'm looking at the world clearly, and I'm saying, hey, there's death in the world, right? There was the bubonic plague, there was Auschwitz, there was, the nuclear holocaust in Hiroshima. These things actually happened. Did you ever hear of Andersonville? How about the Middle Passage? What about, there's so many evil things that have happened in this world, things that you just rightly have to judge evil, yet I do, in light of that, still believe that God exists and that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving, to the extent that that's possible, which is an interesting thing because, I think a lot of people who think about theology realize that there's an issue with the idea that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving, because can God make a rock he can't lift? And so the idea was, well, if he can't lift that rock, then he's not all-powerful. If he can't make it, then he's not all-powerful. So what's the deal? Well, that's sort of like a law of conflicting premises, I think I once read was the correct solution to that. In a universe where there is, an unmovable object, there cannot be an unstoppable force. Well, I've long believed that the correct synthesis of God's basic attributes of all-powerful, all-knowingness, all-lovingness are that he knows everything that can be known, and that it's possible that he can create things where he doesn't know what those things can do, but he can see all the possible outcomes of creation. Who knows? The creation could be so complex that even the possible outcomes might not be knowable because he's all powerful, right? So he can make a universe that has outcomes that are unknowable even to him because he's all powerful. Why not? So I don't know. And I don't have to call a God a him. I can obviously call a her, but I'm 52 years old and I'm colored by my years of Christian, theology and Christian way of life. So, I'm going to tend to call God a him, but think of God as being a father because of that reason. And I think I think all those things are still possible. But one thing that's evidently true is that when things die, they don't come back to life. That God, in his all-lovingness, has chosen clearly in this world not to resurrect things. He just chooses not to do it. Okay, so you're saying there's 108 billion people that have existed on the planet since Homo sapiens came into existence like 50,000, 100,000 years ago. And you say, okay, this one guy was actually brought back to life, and there's testimony about the resurrection, and the evidence is historically weak, but the fact that Jesus existed, that I have no doubt about. The fact that he was the one and only guy resurrected ever in history, except Lazarus in some way, he was resurrected to normal life, or maybe some prophets and before that, defied death in some way, like being ascended up into heaven, Elijah, Moses, I don't know, I'm not Moses, I can't remember the details there. But whatever the case might be, I just think that it's just simply not true. I think there's a basic axiom that one has to accept, that God never chooses to resurrect anyone. He certainly can, but not in this world. He just doesn't do it. He allows the laws of biology and physics to play themselves out. And when he intervenes in this world, and maybe he does intervene in this world, it never is in a way that violates what we perceive to be the law of physics. So now, how do I know that? Read history books. Did Lincoln ever tell you that he saw a miracle? One of the coolest miracles I ever heard kind of reported was Ernest Shackleton when he was climbing over that mountain after that insane voyage, to try to save his crew. And he thought for a little while he was walking with another angel, In my own life, I'm literally convinced at one time in my life I experienced the presence of angels, and I can talk about that. But those things, just because, and if angels really do exist, if spirits that I can't see really do exist, I guess that makes the resurrection more likely. But the axiom of when something dies, it stays dead just appears to be an absolute certainty about this creation that I live in. Then you say, well, the Bible says it. Well, that seems to be false. Well, there's 2,000 years of people believing it. Yeah, I can see why. I would want it to be true. The book itself says if I don't believe it, maybe then I go, I have to believe it. Blind faith. And, these kinds of issues of blind faith led to things like the Inquisition and all kinds of problems. I want the resurrection to be true, but it's not. I still think I'm a Christian because I'm journeying after truth. But even when I was a 16-year-old kid who desperately needed something in my life, like Christianity, the belief in Jesus to set me on a better track in life, even at that point, I had my suspicions that, I don't know, something about that just seems false. And so here's something that's contradictory. So, we sit there and say, if God's all powerful, all loving, there's lots of evil in the world. Is it possible that an all-powerful, all-loving, all-knowing God will allow creation to have lies in it that exist for a very long time that everyone believes, or it acts like they have to believe? Well, certainly. That world, that's evidently true in this world. Look at Islam. I'm not saying it's false. I'm not saying it's true. But what I am saying that it's incompatible with Christianity. Islam is very clear about the fact that Jesus never died on the cross. You know what I mean? And there's a whole misunderstanding of the corrupted Bible. So which is it? Is it the Islamic viewpoint of Jesus, or is it the Catholic viewpoint of Jesus? Because one of them's false, and both of them have been around for more than 1,000 years, believed by, at this point, billions of people. So God allows a world to exist where many lies can be believed for generation after generation after generation for thousands of years. These things are true. You know what I'm saying? And so you have to ask yourself, what is the staying power of this story, this resurrection story? Well, it's breathtaking. The beauty of it, the desire that you want it to be true. And I want it to be true to this day. And I still consider myself a Christian, even talking like this. I think, I honestly think it's totally fine to want the resurrection to be true, know that it probably isn't, it's just a fairy tale, but I certainly want it to be true. And I don't think that disqualifies you in any way of being a Christian. There's a lot of people say, oh, yes, it does. Well, you know what? Why do they get to tell me what the truth is? I'll tell them. That's what I'm doing here, right? I'm saying, no, I think the truth is something else. I think it's very clear that I can believe in the teachings of Jesus. I can believe that not a miracle in the book is true, because the Bible was written at its time in a place where all kinds of other fantastic stories have been written, like by Homer and in the same Greek, and etc. All kinds of, the Bible, the New Testament, books of the New Testament clearly had to compete with those things. And again, think about the breathtaking nature of the story. My absolute favorite part of the Gospels is when Jesus rides into Jerusalem on the donkey. Think about that. But Charles de Gaulle, the president of France, goes into Paris when the Nazis are in charge and like, hey, here I am, I'm the president. Hitler's like, oh, look at this guy. He's just gonna get tortured to death and killed. That's what would have happened to Charles de Gaulle when he rides into Paris when the Nazis are in charge and saying, this is my city, get out. That's what he did, right? He rode into the back of a donkey. Now, I don't think he ever talked like that to Pilate, but maybe, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? He rides in the back of a donkey when he could have led an armed rebellion, but chose not to do that. He also did not have to ride into Jerusalem and be like, hi, I'm here, this is my city, because he's the rightful king, right? He could have just not done that, but he did it. He rode in on the back of a donkey, and he basically told the people what he felt. I mean, I guess he preached to them. There's stories that he overturn the money changers, I guess. I mean, I think that might be related to that the Old Testament Jewish law, Leviticus 25:10, where that year, it's a year of Jubilee, and you're supposed to let the land lie fallow and let people go free, and you're not work too hard. And maybe he came to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord. So for this particular year, you're not supposed to buy and sell things. And by the way, maybe you're also never supposed to buy and sell things at the sacred holy site, And so he's cleaning up house, and he's exercising his authority over his people, telling them you're not following the rules like our Torah says, and you got to start following the rules right. But he knows that when he starts exercising authority like this, he could run afoul of the occupiers, the Roman authority that have no real legitimate right to be there, except that they have the military power to decide to do whatever they want to do, and so he ultimately runs afoul of that. I mean, that's why I think they make such a big deal out of Pilate, saying, I have written what I have written. This is the King of the Jews, because that's what Romans do to the people that they conquer. But the miracles of the Bible, they're just simply not true. The resurrection, that just simply didn't happen. The miracles that are all interspersed all throughout. I mean, some of them may have happened, but there were scientific explanations or something that are now not possible to determine. You know what I mean? That's what those things are. The idea that this guy rides into Jerusalem, tells the truth, takes full responsibility for being the king of his people, when he's in this impossible dilemma between leading a rebellion against the Roman occupiers, and we saw what happened when the Zealots did rise up and fought back against Rome in 68 AD, and some of the New Testament was written or edited in light of those events that happened 30, 40 years later when Masada happened and all that. So and then what? He rides on the back of the donkey, and the story goes that he preaches to the people, and Satan himself, and that's something we need to talk about. Satan himself arranges for his death. And think about that Mick Jagger song, the Sympathy for the Devil. Please allow me to introduce myself. I made sure that Pilate washed his hands and sealed his fate. You know what I'm saying? Satan himself arranges to get this guy killed, and the story's breathtaking in the sense that, of course he would. This guy is showing people that if they have faith, they can be healed of their diseases and all this bad things. And it's like, I can't let this guy live. I got to have him killed. And so he does. He has him nailed to a cross. But he comes back to life, and he beats death, and he beats Satan. He shatters the kingdom of the devil and inaugurates the new kingdom where true righteousness can exist. God, I want that story to be true. No wonder it has stood the test of time for 2,000 years. It's just not true, though. It's beautiful. Jordan Peterson would argue it's more than true. Yeah. I mean, I want that story to permeate my soul. I need that story to permeate my soul, because I don't like death. I mean, I just went to a funeral not long ago, and it's like, God, I'm getting gray. Nothing is worse than death. It just sucks. Who wants to die? I mean, and there's a story about somebody beating it. Somebody beat death and beat evil. Yeah, I want that story. I don't need that story. But it's not true. So what? I mean, so recognizing where I'm really coming from, I think I'm speaking from the heart. I'm trying to, show. I imagine there's been countless true Christians that believe and understand everything that I'm saying, and they've always believed it that way. But you have too many idiots to listen to. People are going to look at you and say, you have to believe in the resurrection in order to be saved. You must believe in the Son of God, and that means you must believe he was God, and you must believe he was resurrected in order to be saved. I'm saying, no, you can be saved anyway. You don't have to believe in that. Maybe in order to be saved, you need to want that story to be true. Because if you don't care if that story's true, then I guess all you think about is money. All you think about is having power over others. Sure, a truly good person wants that story to be true. Maybe there's something to that. So there we are. I mean, I am concerned that I'm trapped in a world where I don't want to, I don't want to turn my back on Christianity, because what I'm trying to do is resurrect Christianity. I'm very, very grateful for what, and no one might know where I'm getting that from, but I'm very, very grateful for this story. I'm very, very grateful for what the Catholic Church has and continues to do for me. I'm very, very grateful to I can think of a lot of Protestants I'm grateful to. I can think of a lot of, John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church. He seemed like a pretty good guy. I live in Pennsylvania. William Penn, he seemed like a good guy. I mean, the guys who stood up when the church was doing things that were wrong. I mean, I when I read Martin Luther, I loved everything he wrote until he started talking that anti-Semitism stuff. And then, and I think about all, the clarity of thinking that I get from some of my Jewish brothers and sisters, like Lex Friedman and Sam Harris. And these guys are thinking so clearly about stuff sometimes that it's breathtaking. But I don't think you don't necessarily need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think you have countless Catholic priests and Protestant ministers throughout the country and throughout the world who think about this like I do. But they have to be careful, because if they say it the way I'm saying it, they could lose their job. They could get excommunicated. They run afoul of idiots that are like, no, it's clear. You must believe in the strict interpretation of this book, or at least these ideas. And if you don't believe in that strictly, then you're just not one of us. Get out. It's like, no. There's a better path to this religion. There's a better way to understand it. And that's why I created this YouTube video. And that's why I'm trying to create these YouTube channel. I see something very clearly inside of me. I'm guided by years of Christian theology and reading books about the saints that I loved. I'm guided by excellent YouTube videos by, Dawkins and, and Sam Harris and Lex Friedman. I'm guided by all kinds of, like Dorothy Day would say it best. I think it was Dorothy Day who said this. She said it best. She said, truth is truth no matter who speaks it. So, I have but one God, the God of truth. What is it do I say to the God of truth? I'm looking for you. Peace.